Hello everyone, my name is Evan Adams. I'm a Fortinet instructor here in Tempe, Arizona, working for Dynamic Worldwide Training Consultants, and I record these videos for the people who have taken my course, and I'm a big believer in being able to practice and also drill in principles on your own, and that's why we set up an NSE 5 lab. In this next video, in my NSE 5 lab demo, I've been trying to do some proof of concepts here because I know that the FortiManager can be a little bit difficult sometimes to truly understand how to manage remotely. So in the last videos we've talked about our device level setting changes, and I'll kind of just do a super quick review on that. So everything that we talked about was relative between, let me get a pin out here, between the device and the device manager, okay? And we looked at the sync and the auto sync settings, but what about the policy and objects? And as you can see here, there's even more that lives at an ADOM level. And what's up with this object database? So that's what we are going to do next. Now, obviously I teach a class, and in the class we take our time to really delve into this. But I'm taking this approach, all right, as like a real world example. So we have two FortiGates that we imported in. That was our local FortiGate that's here locally, and it's behind the FortiManager, or in front of the FortiManager. So the FortiManager is on site. This local FortiGate has been in production. That's kind of like the make-believe scenario that we're doing. Okay, so we brought it in where it was managed before directly from the FortiGates. So that's scenario one. Scenario two is this branch office remote FortiGate that we just shipped out, provisioned with just a public IP address, and also with the FortiManagement access turned on the WAN interface so we could reach out and build that tunnel. We were successful, all right? But right now it is not configured for production. It's a blank slate. So let's go ahead and log into our FortiManager here. And take a look at our device manager. And we already looked at the individual changes that you can make at a device level, but we never imported it in the policy packages. And that's because the policy package in the object database, okay, if you guys remember this one here, is going to be universal across devices. All right, so that's a concept that we kind of have to wrap our heads around. And the reason why is because we're going to show using dynamic mapping we can create a single policy for multiple FortiGates and then dynamically map interfaces, IP addresses, so on and so forth when we do our administration. So, but in this video specifically, we are going to focus on just the local FortiGate, importing the policy packages in, and see how that process is done. Okay. Once again, this is going to be like a FortiGate that's in production. And this PC right here is actually the PC right here in our GNS3. And just to show you, I mean, we do have internet connectivity. So I'll just go to DWWTC. That's where I work, right? As you can see, we have our internet connectivity. So the FortiGate's at least passing traffic. All right, so let's go ahead and bring it in. So what we're going to do is go to import policy. All right. Now the folder says root, and the root is the name of the ADOM. Okay. So we'll talk about that in just a moment, but we are going to just keep it local FortiGate. This is going to be the initial configuration. And in fact, where it says policy package name, I'm going to put a dash in front of that and just type in initial to remind me that this was the first policy package that we brought in. Okay. So now the policy section says I only have one firewall policy. Wouldn't that be nice, ladies and gentlemen? If we just had one. So if you wanted to just pick and choose, you can. I'm just going to bring everything in there. And also our objects selection. So this is saying only use the objects that are dependent on the policies that are being used, or do you want to bring in all objects? You know what? Just to be safe, because our FortiManager at this point is we haven't used it. So this guy is in production. So what I'm going to do specifically, okay, is that I'm going to bring in all the objects and I'll decide which ones to keep and which one to choose. Okay? So now this is also important. We're using port 1 and port 3. Okay, port 1, port 3. I know for a fact that port 1 is my WAN, so that's what I'm going to call it. And my port 3 is my LAN. That could be trust, untrust. And then everything else will be mapped, but it's not being used, and we'll see how that applies later. But we're going to hit next. And it's going to go ahead now and bring in all those objects. Now it found 25 services that were not on the FortiManager, or there was a conflict. Do you guys see that there? So for example, for AOL, if we go view conflict, it looks like it is disabled visibility-wise on the FortiGate, but on the FortiManager you can see the object. That's probably true for some of these legacy services. Also, it looks like we have some enabled, disabled actions. All right. Looks like we have different risk levels. It looks like our filter prof. Okay, sure. All right, so it looks like there's a couple of different options there. It looks like it's all about logging. But like I said, because our FortiGate's the one in production, I'm just going to say select everything from the FortiGate side. Okay, so if there's a conflict of objects, it will do so. Now, if there are duplicate objects, in other words, objects that already exist, the FortiGate's going to skip them. You don't need to have those things twice. We can also clean up the objects library later on too, so it's not a big deal there. So I'm going to hit next. All right, here we go. So this is just a brief overview of our objects. This looks like we did have one address object called local LAN that didn't exist anywhere. And then here's all the duplicate objects that are going to be skipped. So, all right, let's go ahead and hit next. And now it's actually importing them in. Okay. Ta-da! Looks like we're successful. You can download this report if you want to save it for historical reasons. All right, just comes over as a text file. See how it's the actual output of what was skipped. Okay, but when we hit finish, we now have a policy package status, which is checked, and also our config status, which is checked. So what does this actually mean? Well, it means, okay, that at a device level, once again, the individual settings are the same, but also the policies and objects on the FortiGate truly reflect what is on the ADOM level. All right, now it will make a little bit more sense here in a little bit, but let's take a look on what that actually means. So I'm going to go to my device manager, drop it down and go to policy and objects, and we're going to see the initial configuration. And it brought in the IP4 policy, and you can see my name from LAN to WAN. That was originally port 1 to port 2, right? Source IP address, see how I'm using the metadata there. Destination all, always. And it looks like the action is accept, and we have no profiles selected except for certificate inspection, but it's irrelevant, right? And that's it. Okay, so that's kind of like how we do our own policy. And then the installation targets is just a local FortiGate because that's where it came from. All right, so this is kind of just a snapshot of our policy package for that FortiGate when we initially brought it in. Okay, now when we go to our objects configuration though, here's our interfaces. All right, and as you can see, if we open these up, you can see where LAN is mapped dynamically to port 3 and WAN is mapped dynamically to port 1, and then these other ports that we haven't used yet, all right, see how they're mapped, so if we need to use them later on we can. All right, so pretty darn clever. All right, and then also our firewall objects. Here's our local LAN that we had made beforehand, which was 10.10.10.0. So that came from our production FortiGates. All right, and I think that was the only thing it really brought in. But do you see how all the objects are here? Okay, regardless of which FortiGates they are. So now the policy package and everything else like that, the objects, okay, those are a single database. So what I like to do personally, and I think this is a best practice, is your ADOM revisions. And what this ADOM revisions is that I can actually take a little snapshot of that individual database for all of the objects, all of the policy packages, and save it. All right. Now, normally it will roll. So for the size principle of it, if there's too many revisions, I'm going to lock this one simply because it is my initial database. All right. So what's important about this? Well, let's say that I brought in a FortiGate and I wasn't really thinking twice about it. Okay. And I imported a whole bunch of objects and ended up deleting the ones on the FortiManager that I really wanted. Okay, so, and then I'm like, oh sugar, well that was dumb. Well, this is not the same thing as our revision history that we reviewed in previous videos, where we saw the revision history before the device manager and the FortiGate. This is the objects database and the policy database that rests across all, sorry guys, let me get that out of the way, that rest across all of the devices in a single ADOM. So if I bring in a new device and end up trashing like my local LAN and all the different, VIPs I might have had, if you make a revision, you can always revert backwards. Okay, so it does take up a lot of space though, so don't go crazy with them, but I'm just going to call this initial ADOM database. And then I'll say import first production database, and then hit OK. And as you can see here, not only do we have our metadata, we also have our revision history, who created it, and also, okay, you're going to see when we do our import of our remote FortiGate, there's an option to do a revision history. And it's usually not necessary, but you can. All right, so I'm going to hit close. And now we know with confidence that we have a database of our objects. Okay, so, all right, let's go ahead and move. All right, let's go ahead and go forward. Okay, so I'm going to actually stop this video right here. I try to keep these short. But in this video, all we did was bring in the policy and objects from a FortiGate that was in production. Okay. In the next couple of videos, I'm going to show you how to bring in a FortiGate that's a blank slate. All right, so anyways, guys, so more to come. But once again, the policies in the objects database are one across all the FortiGates, and the policy packages are just a collection of firewall policies. And we also have our objects database, which are universal across all the FortiGates, and we're going to use how to dynamically map these to configure our FortiGates across the board. So, okay, I'm going to stop there. I'll see you guys in a few moments when we do the remote FortiGate. Thanks.